At the tender age of 16, Sylvia Likens was a teenage girl whose family led a nomadic lifestyle. They moved from location to location so often that they were sent to live with their relatives to maintain consistency in their schooling. By the time she turned 16, Sylvia was living with her sister Jenny and their mother. However, her parents had recently divorced, and her mother had been sent to jail for shoplifting. Consequently, their father, Lester, sent both Sylvia and Jenny to live in a poorly maintained shelter with Sylvia's friend, Gertrude. The problem was that the shelter was home to 7 children who needed care. Moreover, Gertrude had a history of mental illnesses due to multiple failed marriages. Occasionally, Sylvia and her sister were coerced into nudity and subjected to physical abuse. However, it was Sylvia who was particularly targeted. She was frequently harassed and falsely accused of stealing items. The situation only deteriorated. Gertrude even encouraged her children to humiliate and physically abuse Sylvia for their own amusement. This included pushing her down the stairs and hurling household objects at her. One particularly disturbing incident involved Sylvia being forced to eat a hot dog that was so oversaturated with condiments that it made her vomit. Immediately afterward, she was forced to eat her own vomit. As time went on, Sylvia continued to be falsely accused of various acts, such as prostitution. These false accusations served as a pretext for Gertrude and her children to physically abuse her. The turmoil didn't stop there. Gertrude even invited people, including Sylvia's classmates and neighbors, to participate in tormenting Sylvia. These actions inflicted not only physical injuries but also included tying her up, hurling objects at her, using Sylvia as a practice dummy for judo sessions, inflicting lacerations, forcing her to eat feces, pouring boiling water on her, inflicting burns with cigarettes over 100 times, and violating her through other vicious means. Gertrude eventually prohibited Sylvia from going to school after Sylvia confessed to stealing a gym suit because she was refused the money to buy one. This confession was followed by a round of whipping with a belt. This prohibition allowed them to torture Sylvia around the clock, and the abuse only worsened. When Sylvia was prohibited from using the bathroom, she began to wet herself and suffer from incontinence. She was not only deprived of basic necessities but was also subjected to further torment. She would be doused with hot water and then covered with salt to exacerbate the pain. Children in the neighborhood were charged a few cents to witness Sylvia's abuse, and they were encouraged to commit despicable acts against her. Many times, Sylvia would cry out for help, hoping that someone in the neighborhood would hear her. Unfortunately, no one intervened in the abuse or even informed her parents about the turmoil she was enduring. A ray of light began to shine when Diana, her older sister, arrived with Jenny. She informed Jenny about the situation, but that light soon dissipated once Gertrude heard about Jenny sneaking a sandwich for Sylvia to eat. It wasn't long before Sylvia was subjected to another round of torture, including being scalded in a hot bathtub once again. At that point, neighbors started to grow frightened about what was happening in Gertrude's house. They called a nurse to investigate the problem, but Gertrude kicked the nurse out of her house, stating that Sylvia was no longer there. Gertrude allowed Sylvia to sleep in the basement. However, the next morning, it was reported that Sylvia had wet her bed. This enraged Gertrude and led to another round of physical abuse. After that, Gertrude forced Sylvia to commit acts of debauchery in front of her and her children, where she was mocked. The abuse lasted for months. Eventually, Gertrude grew tired of tormenting Sylvia and devised a plan to abandon her in a forest to perish. When Sylvia overheard the conversation, she attempted to escape from the house. However, Gertrude caught her and gave her crackers. Due to extreme weakness and dehydration, Sylvia was unable to consume the food. As a result, Gertrude shoved the crackers into her mouth and struck her in the head multiple times with a rod until she was rendered unconscious. On October 26, 1965, Sylvia Likens finally succumbed after enduring constant bouts of torture. An autopsy revealed that she had likely suffered a brain hemorrhage and shock due to the constant abuse inflicted by her perpetrators. Gertrude was subsequently sentenced to life in prison, along with her daughter Paula. However, Paula pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was released from prison after 1 year. Eventually, Gertrude was also released from prison in December 1985 due to good conduct. She changed her name, having not accepted responsibility for her actions.